At 25, I learned my family's true face, a gift meant for someone else, and a secret inheritance that would change everything. For as long as I can remember, my birthdays were nothing short of extravagant, a dazzling display of lavish cakes, shimmering decorations, and smiles that sparkled more for show than for genuine warmth. Every year, my family would orchestrate a grand celebration, a carefully choreographed performance where every detail screamed opulence. Yet, amid the glitz and glitter, there was an unspoken emptiness, a hollow echo that left me questioning if I was truly cherished or merely a prop in their spectacle. But this year, at the age of 25, everything changed. As I stepped into the dining room, the familiar chorus of happy birthday rang out, but something was different. The smiles, usually so practiced and bright, now revealed cracks, fleeting moments of insincerity that cut through the festive air. Tea was as if the glittering facade had finally begun to crumble, exposing the true colors of my family. In that bittersweet moment, the extravagant celebration became a mirror reflecting a painful truth. The lavishness could no longer disguise the lack of genuine love and care I had endured for far too long. Surprise! They cheered, their voices an eerie symphony of forced excitement. Confetti rained down in a glittering cascade, the candles on the extravagant three-tiered cake flickering like tiny beacons in the dimly lit dining room. The air smelled of vanilla and expensive perfume, yet there was something sour beneath it all, something I couldn't quite place, but felt deep in my gut. At the center of it stood my younger sister, Clara, her perfectly curled golden hair catching the soft glow of the chandelier. She grinned like a wolf in silk, her teeth gleaming behind crimson lips, and I swore I saw amusement dancing in her eyes. There was something rehearsed about her expression, something triumphant. Mom stepped forward, her manicured hands holding out an elegant envelope. A delicate gold seal shimmered under the warm light, a stark contrast to the cool indifference in her gaze. "Your gift," she said, her voice light, almost dismissive, as if this moment held no weight. A flicker of unease curled in my stomach. Something was off. I took the envelope, the fine paper crisp between my fingers. The entire room felt like it was holding its breath, eyes watching, waiting for my reaction. I hesitated, my heart pounding against my ribs. I had no idea that the moment I opened it, my entire world would shift. With a deep breath, I carefully broke the golden seal and pulled out the crisp sheet of paper inside. My eyes skimmed the elegant, swirling script, then stopped. My breath hitched. A deed to our family's lakeside cottage. The cottage where I had spent endless summers chasing fireflies, where the scent of sun-warmed pine and Clara's laughter used to fill the air. The place I had always imagined one day restoring, fixing the sagging porch, repainting the shutters, planting the rose garden Mom never got around to. My chest tightened with overwhelming gratitude. Maybe, for once, they saw me. Maybe this was their way of acknowledging everything I had done, how I had always been the responsible one, the one who never asked for anything. I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked up, my voice trembling with unexpected emotion. "Thank you. I can't believe this. I'll fix the porch, plant roses." But before I could finish, a sharp chuckle sliced through the warmth of the moment. "Oh," Dad interrupted, his tone light, almost amused. "Not for you." The room went silent. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. "What?" Mom gave a small, dismissive wave of her hand, as if brushing away an unnecessary detail. "The cottage is Clara's now." Clara, still grinning like a cat who had just lapped up a bowl of cream, leaned in. "Yeah, isn't it amazing? I mean, I'll have to redo the kitchen, it's outdated, but it'll be perfect for me and Ryan after the wedding." The words barely registered. The warmth that had flooded my chest only seconds ago turned to ice. My fingers tightened around the deed. "Not for me." The warmth drained from my body. The words hung in the air, surreal and cutting. "Not for you." Dad's voice was light, almost amused, as if this were some kind of inside joke. "It's Clara's now." I felt the deed crumple slightly in my grip, my breath caught in my throat. Mom, her expression as serene as ever, slid another envelope across the table toward me. "But don't worry, sweetheart," she said with an airy smile. "We didn't forget about you." With numb fingers, I opened it. My pulse roared in my ears as my eyes landed on the words. "A generous donation has been made in your name to the Future Foundation's charity." That was it. No house, no inheritance, no recognition. Just my name attached to some faceless charity I'd never even heard of. The room tilted slightly, my vision narrowing. I swallowed hard. You donated my gift. Of course, Mom beamed. It's for a great cause. Isn't that so much more meaningful than a material possession? Clara giggled, twirling a strand of her perfect golden hair. Come on, Elena, don't be selfish. I'm getting married. I need the house. You're independent. You don't need much. Independent. They meant unloved. I looked around the table, searching for some sign of remorse, some flicker of acknowledgement that this was cruel. But all I saw were nods, smiles, indulgent expressions as if they expected me to thank them for their incredible generosity. Something inside me cracked. Mom's voice was light, almost dismissive, as if she were explaining why one child got the last slice of cake while the other just had to accept it. Clara's getting married, she repeated, folding her hands neatly in front of her. She needs stability, a proper home. You understand, don't you? My throat tightened. Understand. I understood perfectly. This wasn't about need. This was about Clara always getting what she wanted, while I was expected to smile and accept whatever scraps were left. Dad sipped his wine, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. You're independent, Elena. Always have been. You never needed much. Independent. There it was again. That word they wielded like a compliment but used as an excuse to justify neglect. Independent meant I was the afterthought. The one who didn't require love, or attention, or fairness. The one who was fine without it. Clara leaned in, her smile sweet but her eyes glinting with triumph. Oh, come on, sis. It's not like you were going to live there. It'd be wasted on you. Wasted on me. Something inside me twisted. A slow, burning anger uncoiled, spreading through my veins. I looked around the table, at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me, realizing for the first time that maybe they never truly did. A hollow ache settled in my chest, but beneath it, something else stirred, something sharp, something unyielding. This wasn't just a house, this was proof. Proof that I had never really been part of this family, and that realization. It changed everything. Independent. Such a pretty little lie. They said it like it was a badge of honor, as if I should be grateful for my resilience, for my ability to stand on my own. But now I saw the truth hiding beneath the word. Independent wasn't a compliment, it was an excuse. It was how they justified giving everything to Clara while tossing me aside. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the edge of the dinner table. Memories flooded back, weekends spent at Dad's company, poring over spreadsheets while Clara was out with her friends, laughing without a care in the world. The times I'd helped Mom with the groceries, handled family responsibilities without being asked. The birthdays I'd spent pretending that the meaningless gifts and performative celebrations mattered. I'd been the good daughter. The practical one. No drama. No demands. And for what? To be overlooked, to be handed a donation slip while my sister got the house I'd always dreamed of. A slow, bitter realization settled in my chest. I wasn't independent. I was invisible. A convenient afterthought. And the worst part. They didn't even feel guilty about it. They assumed I would take it, that I would smile through the pain, just like I always had. But something inside me cracked at that moment. A thread that had been holding me together for years suddenly snapped. No more. They had just given me the greatest gift of all. Clarity. And with that clarity, a dangerous thought surfaced, one that sent a slow, cold smile creeping across my lips. They thought I had nothing. They had no idea what I was about to take from them. That night, after the hollow birthday dinner, I retreated to the quiet of my childhood room, the walls still holding the echoes of better days. The silence was thick, suffocating. My mind raced, my thoughts a tangled mess. I couldn't shake the image of Clara's wide, triumphant smile, her hands wrapped around the deed to the cottage that had always felt like home to me. But that wasn't the worst part. It was the way they'd looked at me as if I didn't matter. As if I wasn't worth more than the empty envelope in my hands. I needed a way out. I needed something to make it right. And then, in a strange moment of clarity, I remembered Grandpa. He'd always believed in me. Grandpa Harrington, the patriarch of our family and the founder of Harrington and Grand, had been more than a grandfather. He was my mentor, my guide. I had spent countless hours in his study, sitting across from him at that old wooden desk, listening to his stories, his advice. His words had always been a beacon, shining through my doubts. But one thing had always stuck with me, one whisper that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. "You're the only one with the head for this, Elena." Grandpa knew. He knew I had it in me, the fire, the intelligence, the vision. I rushed into the study, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar scent of old leather and ink greeted me, but there was something else, something darker tonight. I dug through the piles of papers on Grandpa's desk, my fingers trembling as I sifted through decades of company documents, financial reports, and old family photos. And then, buried under a stack of letters, I found it, a letter addressed to me. "To my granddaughter, 55% shares in Harrington and Grand. Use them when you're ready." My breath caught in my throat. Grandpa had left me the majority of the company's shares. More than a symbol of his faith in me, it was power. I was ready. The truth settled heavily in my chest. My family thought they could push me aside, but they hadn't known about this. They hadn't known that I wasn't as helpless as they thought. And now, the tables were about to turn. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. My family hadn't simply overlooked it, they'd intentionally forgotten to mention the one thing that could have changed everything. Grandpa had entrusted me with more than just his company. He had passed on his legacy, the very heart of Harrington and Grand, believing that I could steer it towards something greater. But to them, I was invisible. They had convinced themselves that I wasn't the one who could take the reins. They had assumed I would never find out. After all, I wasn't the one with the flair, the drama, the demands. I had always been the dutiful daughter, the one who stayed behind the scenes. The one who worked quietly, who never sought attention. They thought I didn't have the fire in me. They were wrong. I clenched the letter tightly in my hands, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a weapon. A weapon I was going to wield to reclaim what was mine. In that moment, I understood something profound. This wasn't just about the shares or the company. It was about proving to myself, to my family, and to the world that I was capable of more than they had ever believed. They had taken my childhood, my happiness, my love for that cottage, and for what? A tax write-off, to give my sister a head start. No, it was time for me to take control, to stop letting them dictate my worth. I had always believed in hard work and determination. But now, I had power. The tables had turned. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone forget me. The morning air was crisp as I walked through the office doors, my heels clicking decisively against the marble floor. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. The familiarity of the place, with its glossy wood panels and polished furniture, felt suffocating. I had spent so many years here, working without acknowledgement, my contributions ignored like invisible ink on a page. But today, everything was about to change. As I entered Dad's office, Clara was seated across from him, her eyes gleaming with excitement as she scrolled through renovation plans on her tablet. The thought of her sitting there, already planning her life in the cottage that should have been mine, made my blood boil. But I wasn't about to let her or anyone else see it. I walked straight to the desk, feeling the weight of Grandpa's letter in my hand, as heavy as a battle axe. Clara glanced up, a smirk creeping across her face as if she expected me to congratulate her. "You're here early," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Clara, get out," I said, my tone sharp and unforgiving. "I'm claiming my shares." The letter slid across the desk, its edges curling slightly from the force of my hand slamming it down. The sound reverberated in the room, like a thunderclap in a still night. Dad's face drained of color, his mouth opened and closed, struggling to find words. His eyes darted nervously between Clara and me. "Elena, that's outdated," he stammered, attempting to regain his composure, but it was too late. His mask had slipped. I let the silence stretch, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "Lawyers disagree," I said, my voice unwavering. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Effective today, I'm CEO. You're all fired unless Clara hands over the cottage." Clara's expression shifted from smug to pure shock, her mouth agape. She stared at me, speechless. Dad sputtered, his face now flushed with panic, but it was already over. The board backed me. Grandpa's will was ironclad. The legacy of Harrington and Grand would now be mine to shape, and I would no longer be overlooked. Clara's screams echoed in my ears as I turned to walk away. They were the sound of a life I was done living, the life where I was the quiet one, the invisible one. But as I moved past them, A sense of triumph flooded my chest. The power, the control, it was mine now. And that cottage, I let Clara keep it. She could have the house, but I was taking the world. Dad's face went ashen, the color draining from his cheeks as if he had just seen a ghost. The words stumbled out of his mouth, but they lacked conviction. That's outdated, he sputtered, his voice quivering. It was clear that he was scrambling, trying to regain control of a situation that was spiraling beyond his grasp. Clara, who had been lounging lazily in her chair moments ago, now shot to her feet, her expression shifting from confidence to outright panic. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She could feel the weight of the moment just as much as I did. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I let the silence stretch between us, letting my words sink in. The room felt colder, the air thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, but it wasn't from fear, it was from a growing sense of liberation. Outdated, I repeated slowly, my eyes never leaving Dad's trembling form. Lawyers disagree, I spoke calmly, my voice steady. Effective today, I'm CEO, and as for you. I glanced at Clara, who looked like she might faint at any moment. You're fired unless Clara hands over the cottage. Dad's face contorted in a mix of disbelief and panic. He reached out as if trying to grasp at some last thread of authority. Elena, you don't understand, he pleaded, his voice rising. This is your sister's future. She needs that house. It's her turn. I didn't flinch. I had heard these words before, wrapped in the familiar fabric of family manipulation. The excuses, the justifications, but this time, I was no longer the dutiful daughter, the silent observer. This time, I was the one who held the power. I understand perfectly, I said, my tone even and final. I understand that you've always assumed I would be the one to sacrifice for everyone else. But not anymore. Clara tried to speak, but her words were jumbled, incoherent. I wasn't sure if she was angry, scared, or a mix of both. Dad, on the other hand, had gone entirely still, his face pale and haunted as the full weight of the situation settled on him. You can't just take over, Dad whispered hoarsely. This company is mine. Was yours, I corrected him sharply. But it's mine now. The realization hit him like a punch in the gut. His mouth opened and closed, but no more words came out. The board, as I knew they would, had my back. Grandpa's will was clear, and it wasn't outdated, it was ironclad. I wasn't just a daughter in his eyes, I was his heir. I'll be in my office, I said coldly, turning to leave. You can go ahead and start looking for a new job, Dad. Clara tried to protest, but the words caught in her throat as she saw the finality in my expression. The family dynamic had shifted in an instant. The power I had always given away was now mine, and I would never be overlooked again. I felt a small thrill course through me as I stepped away, knowing that I had finally broken free from their expectations, from their assumptions about who I was and what I deserved. The words lingered in the air like smoke after an explosion. Lawyers disagree, I repeated slowly, the edge in my voice razor sharp. I watched their faces twist with confusion and fear, but there was no turning back now. I had stepped into a new role I had earned without their permission. A cold smile spread across my face, and I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on them. Effective today, I continued, each syllable deliberate and calculated, I'm CEO. You're all fired unless Clara hands over the cottage. The silence that followed felt suffocating, as though the entire room had collectively held its breath. Dad's face was a study in shock, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. Clara, wide-eyed and trembling, looked like she might crumble right there on the floor. She had been so sure of her place, her entitlement to everything. Now, that certainty was being ripped away. I didn't wait for their responses. There was nothing they could say that would change the course I'd set. I'm not asking, I said, my voice unwavering. I'm telling you. Clara's jaw clenched as she tried to regain some semblance of control. She hadn't expected me to fight back. She never thought I would be the one to stand up, to claim what I was owed. All her life, she had been the one to take while I gave, always the obedient daughter, always the one to stay in the background. That would end today. Dad, still frozen in his seat, finally managed to speak, but his words were weak, desperate. Elena, you don't understand, this isn't how it works. I stepped forward, my gaze never leaving his. No, I understand perfectly. This is exactly how it works. I've watched all of you take, without a second thought. But I'm done being the sacrifice. This company is mine now. And if you want to keep your little toys, your family secrets, you will play by my rules. Clara, unable to mask her frustration any longer, exploded. You can't do this, she shrieked, her hands shaking as she pointed at me. That cottage was always mine, and you know it. I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. And yet, Grandpa's will begs to differ. You should have read the fine print. Dad's face was ashen, his body tense. I could tell he was trying to salvage the situation, but the more he spoke, the more desperate his attempts seemed. Elena, please, this is a mistake. I'm your father. And I'm your daughter, I interrupted, my voice biting. But today, that doesn't matter. The truth hung heavy between us, filling the room with the kind of silence only broken dreams and unspoken words could create. I stood tall, refusing to show any sign of weakness. I've worked for everything I have, nothing was handed to me. I'm not asking for approval anymore, I'm taking what I've earned. Clara took a step back, her eyes wide and filled with panic. But the company, Dad worked for that, built it from the ground up. You can't just come in and take it. Watch me, I said, finally turning my back on them and walking toward the door. The last thing I heard as I exited was Dad's defeated voice, his words thick with regret. You're breaking this family, Elena. And for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt. Clara's scream shattered the tension, a shrill cry that echoed through the office, but it was not the sound of victory. It was the sound of everything she'd ever known, everything she thought was guaranteed, crumbling around her. Her hands shook as she reached out toward me, her lips trembling, as if to say something, anything, but the words failed her. Give me the cottage back, Elena, she yelled, her voice cracking, her face contorted with rage and disbelief. But I stood firm, unmoved by her outburst. This was no longer about family, about forgiveness, or love. It was about something far greater. It was about claiming what was rightfully mine. Dad, his face a mask of panic, moved toward me with his hand stretched out. Elena, please, you don't understand. This isn't how it's supposed to be. You're making a huge mistake. His voice was shaky, desperate, no longer the strong, authoritative figure he once was. I didn't flinch. It's not a mistake, I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it before. It's the only truth left in this family. Clara was pacing now, muttering under her breath, her mind racing as if trying to find a way out of the mess I had just thrown her into. She stopped suddenly, facing Dad, her voice rising in pitch, almost pleading. We can't let her do this. We can't just let her take over everything. But there was no turning back. The board members, the ones Dad had spent years trying to control, had already made their decision. The old men who once blindly followed him, who had played the game of favoritism and power, had seen the writing on the wall. When the call came, when the lawyers confirmed that Grandpa's will was ironclad, there was nothing they could do. The shares were mine by law, and the family's manipulations, their hidden agendas, were no longer enough to hold me back. I'm not asking for your permission, I said to Dad, my eyes never leaving his. The board has already spoken. I'm the CEO now. I could see it in his eyes, the slow, dawning realization that his grip on the company, on the life he'd built for himself, was slipping away, and it terrified him. I turned away from him and looked at the board members, the ones who had backed me without a second thought. Their faces were a mix of relief and cautious optimism. They had been waiting for a moment like this, waiting for someone who could take the company forward. The decision is final, I continued, the weight of my words sinking in. I'm in charge now, and if you want to keep your positions, you'll all play by my rules. Clara's sobs filled the silence, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but a sense of satisfaction. This was no longer about them or their expectations. It was about me, about claiming my place in this world, where I had always been pushed aside and forgotten. The walls of the office closed in on us, but I was no longer afraid. I had fought for this, and I had won. As Clara's cries continued behind me, I stepped out of the office, leaving them all to pick up the pieces of their broken empire. Now, I sit in the CEO chair, my fingers gripping the polished oak desk, the weight of it a symbol of everything I had fought for. The company, once a place of complacency and broken promises, was now mine to reshape. My decisions were finally my own. I had always been the quiet one, the overlooked one pushed to the side, expected to just follow along. But now, the tables had turned. Each morning, as I walk into the glass-walled conference room, I feel the power that once seemed so far out of reach, now within my grasp. The walls once cold and sterile feel like they're closing in on the past. The years of silent sacrifice, of working weekends while Clara danced through life, are finally behind me. As I stand before the board, making decisions that will steer this company into a new era, I realize something. This was never just about the power, the control, or the success. It was about reclaiming my sense of self. It was about proving to everyone, especially myself, that I mattered, that my voice could be heard. The cottage, I let Clara keep it. I could have fought for it, but I didn't want to. I didn't need it. What was a house, really, compared to the space I had carved out for myself in the world? Let her have the walls and the rooms. What I had now was freedom. When I look out of my office window, watching the city below, I realize that my true victory wasn't in the company, or even in the money. It was in realizing that I had always been enough. I had never needed validation from my family. The real treasure was the person I had become. And yet, despite all the success, despite everything I had built and accomplished, my mother still calls weekly. Each time, her voice is tinged with desperation, asking for money, an endless cycle of needing, wanting, but never offering anything in return. She's never changed, but I have. Her calls used to make me feel guilty, but now, all I feel is a sense of distance. A painful, but necessary, distance. I've learned to set boundaries, something I never knew how to do before. The first time she asked for money, I didn't hesitate. I sent her brochures for financial literacy classes. Maybe you should try learning how to manage your money better, I said over the phone. It's a skill that might come in handy. She didn't understand. Of course she didn't. She wanted the handouts, the quick fixes. But I couldn't give her that anymore. The world had given me nothing. I had built everything from the ground up, and it was time she learned to do the same. I've stopped feeling guilty. I've stopped feeling anything but a quiet, steady satisfaction. Because I know now more than ever that my worth isn't tied to what others think of me. It never was. In the end, I learned that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in what we take, but in what we leave behind. The family that had never truly seen me was now watching from the sidelines, as I built something that was all mine. No handouts, no pity, just the quiet, undeniable power of a woman who finally knew her worth. My mother's weekly calls became just background noise. I stopped feeling the weight of guilt. I wasn't the person I used to be, the one who gave and gave, always expecting nothing in return. Now, I was someone who had learned to stand up for herself, someone who knew the value of boundaries, of independence, of self-worth. And that was worth more than any house or any inheritance. I hadn't inherited their love, their approval, or their acceptance, but I had inherited something far more powerful: strength, resilience, and the drive to create a future that was mine alone. My family might have forgotten me, but I would never forget the lessons I'd learned through their neglect. I would never forget the day I realized that my worth was never tied to their expectations. I had built something far more valuable than they could ever understand. A life that was mine, a future that I controlled. And in that, I found peace.